you probably haven't seen a presentation start at the conference that began with the C word before, and I admit it's fairly unusual, but these are undoubtedly unusual times. Furthermore, I think it would be more unusual not to at least address the elephant in the room briefly before we resume normal service and discuss what we are all here to discuss at the beginning. So in the last month, what we've done at Appsflyer is we've looked at over 1.5 billion organic installs, 850 million paid installs, and just under 400 billion app sessions within our data. And we're releasing a weekly update on the trends that we're seeing globally at the moment. I'm only going to be talking about the categories that have seen growth, as we're not here today to beat on anyone. And so it's important to focus on the positives in that respect. So let's begin. Some of the headlines. I choose my words carefully when I say the word positive, because of course I use that in inverted commas. There's nothing positive about the broader macro dynamics about what's going on in the world right now, but there are, for mobile marketers, undoubtedly opportunities. Ultimately, the more time people spend at home, the more time they spend on their phones, and this is an opportunity for us to get our apps in front of people and to help them through the difficult times. Personally, I've found it's become an almost full-time job in the last few weeks, just keeping up with the ridiculous quantity of memes sent to me on WhatsApp, the vast majority of which are definitely of questionable quality, maturity and propriety for sure. But the phone time, increased phone time that everyone is experiencing at the moment is, of course, a huge benefit to an app marketer. Clearly, as the world has adjusted to working from home, productivity apps have seen huge growth. Apps such as video conferencing, messaging and other comms tools, social networking apps, both new and old, the perennial, evergreen, almost immune, top performing app category of gaming, of course. And then, of course, important apps like health and fitness apps, whether it's mental health apps such as Headspace and mindfulness apps, or more physical health and fitness apps such as home workout apps like LETICS. There are just loads of stories of apps that are helping consumers through these hard times. And for those wondering, that's me, 3 in from the left there, just yesterday. So, however, there are of course many categories that are also suffering. And as I said a few minutes ago, I'm not going to go into detail on that, as I don't want to talk down any of our peers in the industry at a time when we all need to be pulling together. Inevitably, should there be a recession due to coronavirus, and the overwhelming consensus is that there will be, consumer spending on discretionary items will no doubt be hit, and user lifetime values will suffer and many markets will contract. And this could impact any category over the mid to long term, not just those that are being hardest hit now. But let's look at some of the positive growth trends that we're seeing in a bit more detail. Overall, on a global scale, and looking at all app categories, there's been growth in paid and organic downloads, as well as app sessions. We could call this a positive trend, but of course we must caveat that word, as I said earlier. But nonetheless, the positive, in inverted commas, is that we can take overall is that the app economy is growing. App developers are helping consumers get through challenging times, and many categories are experiencing significant growth. So a few examples of this in the coming slides. Firstly, globally, news apps have seen a huge boost in recent weeks, and perhaps unsurprisingly, as people look to help to keep up with the latest developments around the world, understand the guidance from their respective governments, and of course increase their understanding of the situation in general. And this is happening at a time when many of the typical use cases for downloading a news app, such as major sporting events and social gatherings, aren't taking place. So this makes the growth even more interesting when we see it in that context. Within the USA, the growth in the news apps is particularly pronounced. While the situation didn't actually worsen there until a few weeks later than in other parts of the world, these developments were clearly of interest to the public. But on the plus side, at least those downloading these apps in the USA can rest assured that they have a strong and competent leader to guide them through these difficult times. In the UK, as in most countries, social app downloads have skyrocketed in recent weeks. UK saw an increase in paid and organic downloads of social apps, with organic downloads growing by 650% week on week in the middle of March. France typifies another trend that we've seen in many markets, with a surge in downloads of media streaming apps. This began in the third week of the month as the situation in France began to worsen. And of course, we saw the same in Italy, but it began a week or two earlier for reasons that we're all very sadly familiar with. In Germany, our efficiency-loving friends are eschewing the trend for the growth in business apps that have grown over 90% in the recent weeks. And finally, data from Russia shows perhaps one of the less expected trends that we see in many markets, and that is the growth in photography apps. Organic installs of photography apps grew by a huge 220% in the third week of March. I don't know about you, but the last thing I'm inclined to do after sitting around in my pants and not showering or shaving for 3 days is to reach for the camera app and create photographic evidence of my gradual, but nonetheless clearly visible physical and psychological decline. But many people do, and I guess this is probably explained by people's desire to share their lives digitally now more than ever, given that we can't interact socially. So there we are. James asked me to include a few slides on what we've seen, and I think I've managed to get through that without saying the actual C word itself. So this wasn't the original topic for my presentation, but I hope that sort of brief overview of our data has been of interest to you. We're updating this data on a weekly basis, and if you head to the URL on the screen, you'll be able to find our report in full, broken down into about 25, 30 of the top markets, and a large number of different app categories underneath, along with some great commentary from our amazing analysis team. So I suppose we'd better actually do some work, and I'm also conscious of time, so I'm going to give you the slightly abridged version of the original topic and get through this in about 10 to 15 minutes or so there's time for Q&A. I'm sure that's something you'll thank me for very shortly. Quick introduction about Appsflyer. We are the global leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics with around about just over 1,000 employees. We passed that benchmark last week. We work with about 90,000 apps with 18 offices across the world, just under 6,000 media partners integrated, and a global market share of around about 65%. Myself, I've been in mobile for longer than I care to mention, around about 12 years. I've been privileged to work for a number of the leading apps in mobile marketing and business development roles, and I'm now Director of Marketing for Appsflyer in EMEA, helping to take that product out to market, a product that I've been hugely passionate about for many years since I met the Appsflyer team a long time ago. So for context, let's start by looking at the market we're actually talking about and some of the trends underlying mobile marketing at present. This year alone, advertisers are expected to spend around about $286 billion on mobile advertising, which is in itself just quite a staggering amount, and that will grow to just over $400 billion by 2023. The app install percentage of that overall spend on mobile advertising is growing significantly as a subset of that as well. Looking at what's driving that growth in app install spend, we see a meaningful increase in the reliance of app publishers on paid media to drive app installs. Organic free downloads are definitely under pressure. The app economy is awash with VC money. How that will continue, it remains to be seen, but the app economy has certainly in the last year or two been hugely heated with VC money. Many large non-traditional businesses, bricks and mortar businesses, are now investing very heavily in mobile as well. And of course, app stores, as we all know, are fiercely competitive, and this is meaning that increasingly app developers are having to pay to cut through that noise and get their app in front of people. This is particularly the case if you're a smaller or newer app, perhaps rather obviously, but it is a trend that's affecting apps of all sizes. As you can see there on the right, overall, all app size categories have seen a meaningful increase in the amount of paid media that they rely on in order to drive app downloads recently. Secondly, the percentage of businesses using retargeting is growing, but has begun to plateau in the last 12 months. It remains, in our opinion, a massively underutilized channel. Only 35% or so of non-gaming categories are running retargeting campaigns, and only 22% of gaming apps are using it. Why is this a missed opportunity? Well, the data on incrementality is pretty clear. Categories that can benefit most from retargeting include gaming, lifestyle, travel, and shopping, and there are many others. Lastly, when we look at what's underlying where we are now and where we've been in the last 12 to 18 months is the increasing sophistication of the tools available to marketers across the entire mobile MarTech stack. They're becoming more robust, feature-rich, and interoperable. Anyone who's been around as long as I have, a mobile dinosaur as it were, will know that there used to be many, many painful conversations internally with product managers and engineers around flaky SDKs and wobbly APIs, and the pain that there was to get new MarTech and new ad tech into apps was very, very much felt by all. That's no longer the case. That the tools themselves have become significantly more sophisticated, and that's fantastic. That presents both a challenge and an opportunity for mobile marketers, though. The challenge is, of course, this new world full of very sophisticated tools needing bolting together is in itself something that people need to get their heads around across the business, not just marketing. But of course, it's an absolutely huge opportunity for marketers to automate a lot of what they do and to simplify their lives, scale the activities, and deliver much better results for their business. So let's take a look then at how these trends in UA and engagement and some of the tools available to marketers are impacting the traditional role of the marketer in 2020, and will ultimately lead us to this 286 billion in ad spend this year. Firstly, UA itself, the traditional role of the UA and performance marketing manager, is becoming increasingly automated. Facebook and Google are releasing tools that are now automating a large chunk of what marketers used to be doing a few years ago. And with around about 2/3 of mobile marketing spend going into those two channels, clearly a lot of the traditional role of the mobile marketer is now automated, whether it's through Facebook and Google themselves, or whether it's through campaign management tools such as Bidalgo or Appsflyer or some of the many other campaign management solutions, or whether it's through manual in-house solutions. You know, there are great examples of people hacking together JSON scripts that will create automatically feed the platforms that they're advertising on with a huge amount of creative, and do this in an automated fashion. So what does this actually mean for the mobile marketer? Well, we've already heard from some of the speakers and panelists today how they're needing to be much more flexible with their bids and campaign strategies in order to react to the current market conditions. And ultimately, tools that allow for greater automation of UA activities means that you can do a lot more with less, spend less time on manual tasks, and focus on activities that drive greater value. So that's less time spent trafficking campaigns and manually optimizing processes that can now be automated, and a lot more time spent on creative and on better optimizing your campaign rules. So if we're not spending quite so much time doing the trafficking and doing the very top of funnel user acquisition, what we see is a need for marketers to work more deeply in the funnel, optimizing towards deeper funnel events such as registration, purchases, and social shares. Hopefully, everyone here in the room has long since moved away from optimizing towards CPI and is now looking at much more valuable in-app events that the user performs and optimizing your campaigns towards that. And with automation removing some of those more manual trafficking tasks, the marketer is afforded much more time to work on monetization and conversion design deeper in the funnel. And this means two key things. Firstly, much greater alignment is needed between marketing and the product and tech functions. And ideally, this would take the form of growth squads that share the same KPIs, and you reduce that marketing, product, tech, siloed thinking, conflicted KPIs dynamic. We just heard from Skyscanner, a business that I've worked at previously, and I know that they were one of the leaders in the mobile first space when it came to squadifying large chunks of their business. They were doing this back in 2014, so and Spotify much longer before that. So much greater alignment between marketing, product, and tech. And then the second implication of this is, of course, that marketers need to adapt and be part creative, which will probably come more naturally, but also part data scientist. And how you use those tools and then how you spend your time not using those tools but working on creative is a balance that needs to be struck. Lastly, by investing in your tooling and automation, you have a much greater chance of improving your results, which is what your business relies on you for. And what we saw last year was that it wasn't a great year for a lot of large tech companies. And there's already a large trickle-down effect. Your bosses, your management team, your board, and your VCs will expect to see a significant amount more financial discipline and a much clearer focus on ROI going forward. The market will naturally contract this year. It would have done before you know what happened. That was already happening because of these dynamics from last year, these very high profile challenges that some of these businesses faced. So that was already going to happen, but it will become even more important and necessary now going forward. But this is a great opportunity for us to use these tools to create greater campaign, better optimization, and conduct more rational, data-driven marketing in a less frenzied marketplace ultimately. So these tools and other automation processes can significantly help marketers to achieve this and help us help us to improve the performance of the business for our stakeholders. So to summarize, in 2019, what got us here to where we are today is we saw a significant amount of pressure on organic downloads and increasing reliance on paid marketing. We continue to see that retargeting is a challenge for many businesses. And we also see a much more robust and sophisticated MarTech stack available to marketers, which presents both a challenge and an opportunity. Going forward, we see that UA is being increasingly automated, which is a good thing, and that leads to much greater integration between the the marketing and product functions within the business to create true growth functions. And if they get that bit right, that should lead to much greater discipline within the organization and a real focus on ROI. If you want to join us in a week or two's time, we have a fantastic panel that we're launching in Mama Connect. Mama is our events brand. We're doing what James and all the team at App Promotion Summit has done recently, which is to take our events online. And we hope you'll join us for the launch of Mama Connect, where we'll be talking about growth squads and growth functions and how marketing and tech and product all need to play nicely together. And we've got some wonderful guests from Feature, from Glovu, from SoundCloud, some names that I'm sure you all know. So we'd love you to join us for that. And last but not least, I think just want to say an absolutely huge thanks to James and to Andrew and everyone at our Promotion Summit for doing such an amazing job of taking this event online, innovating, not giving up, not allowing this terrible situation that we have in the broader world at the moment to stop us as an industry coming together and networking. So virtual round of applause for them, if we may all do so. And thanks very much to you guys. And I'm very happy to take any questions.
My audio and okay, so let me see. We've got a few questions in here. If anyone has any other questions, you saw from David's background, he's got huge experience in mobile and app marketing and marketing in general. So we've got a few minutes now, so it's a great chance to ask some questions. We have a question from Nick Duddy. Hello, Nick. He's asking, have Appsflyer run any forecasting of spend usage over the years based on the impending recession? So I guess he's talking, I don't know if that's ad spend or is that in-app purchase, Nick, spend or kind of app usage. I guess we sort of take a general view on that. David, what's your forecast, for what's going to happen, and how do you see any economic recession affecting apps?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, hello to Nick, a friend of mine from a long time ago. So lovely to hear from you. Yeah, we have done that. We released a report around about a month and a half ago, actually, on forecasting how the app install segment of the overall mobile advertising market would grow in the next 3 to 4 years. Obviously, that was before. I'm trying not to use the C word today, just because I think that'd be that's just a little mission of mine. So before this all happened, we released that, and undoubtedly there's going to be some changes to that forecast. I think that'd be very fair to say. We aren't yet reforecasting because, of course, this is all extremely new. We really are talking about dynamics and stuff that have started kicking up in February and March, but we will definitely be updating that report when the time is right, and when we have the right data to show how it's impacting more in the mid to long term. I think anyone who's looking past the next week or two at the moment is probably got a crystal ball, because it's definitely very challenging to predict what's going to happen short, mid and long term.
I suppose, yeah. So Barry has a good question. He's saying you presented these kind of category data. Is that being skewed by some huge kind of whales that are really outperforming the whole sector? I don't know, maybe he's thinking Facebook or something, or one or two news apps is just blowing the whole category up, and everyone else is not actually seeing that growth.
So the short answer is no. Of course, what our team do is they normalize that data to remove outliers. So they use various methods. I believe things like removing top 10%, top bottom percent. Obviously, they review the data manually. So no, there isn't any huge skew. But when you've got a category such as social, which is so heavily dominated by a small handful of players, then of course naturally they will have a strong influence on that data. But all of the data that we present is across, as you saw, I think just about 2.8 billion apps and just under 400 billion user sessions. So the data is definitely statistically significant, and as I said earlier, they remove outliers and to make sure that the data is robust in that respect.
Got it. And question, retargeting. I was surprised at the low levels of retargeting uptake, actually. And Thies is asking, how much of the total ad budget do you suggest should go to retargeting? Okay, yeah, depends on the business and the vertical, but what's the rule of thumb?
I wouldn't want to give anyone a sort of a generic rule answer to that, and that's probably a little bit of a cop-out answer, so forgive me for that. What's really clear to me from that data, I was also very surprised by that, by the way, but what's also very clear to me is that it's underutilized. The data on incrementality is pretty clear, and to the question around how much of your budget, that would depend entirely on where you are in terms of your ability to do this. So don't start by spending 70% of your budget if you're just getting used to the technique, how you do retargeting well and making that work. Start with test and learn budget and go from there. Whereas if you're in one of the categories that has a lot to gain from retargeting, then of course you could be a bit more aggressive. But for me, I was surprised by how low that data is, and I really think that it's just says to me there's a great opportunity for marketers to be testing and using this a lot better. Ideally, using multi-touch attribution to understand how best to balance their media mixes, and I also cross-device attribution, which we call people-based attribution, in order to understand those different user journeys across different platforms and optimize from there, and remove the retargeting spam that we all get, which is when we bought from somewhere and then on another platform where we've done some research a week earlier, we keep getting hit with buy now messages. So there's so many opportunities within retargeting to improve the user experience, to improve conversions and revenue. But it's definitely a question of wherever you are in your journey on retargeting, starting with the right level of budget and working from there.
Just to follow up on it, I think Naveen, he's from Facebook. He's saying why is retargeting underutilized? And Tasha is saying, in terms of a global brand, what's your advice for retargeting? Do you start with Asia and work back across by geo, or do you just flood it across? Yeah, do you start in one area? How's the best way to roll that out?
If it was me starting anywhere, I'd be starting, as I said, with test and learn. Picking markets that you think are statistically significant. So not picking ones where you're so small or your brand isn't well enough known, or you don't have sufficient traffic to test in, because then your experiment's going to be flawed from the start. So you need to have the courage, I think, to pick a market which you think is typical for your business, and control the experiment from there. If you have 5 markets, for example, in your top 10 that you think show similar characteristics, perhaps you look at Western Europe, and maybe Western Europe is quite homogenous for you, then I would then be picking 1 or 2 markets within Western Europe and leaving out the rest. So you have a split test in that respect. But again, it's, there's so many different tools. There's lots of really fantastic ad networks that focus on and specialize on retargeting, from Remerge to many, many others. And really, it's a question of picking the right partners to work with, picking the right tools, and then designing your experiment well, so that you can compare and contrast the incrementality that you get from those experiments.
Got it. And why have people been, why is take up still low? Is it an awareness issue? Is it an implementation issue or bandwidth issue? What's the problem?
It's a good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer. I think it's a confidence issue, if you ask me. I think mobile marketing moves very, very quickly, and I think the other thing I would say, so it moves very quickly. The tech is, as we saw earlier, very sophisticated, but there's a lot of it, and I think therefore there's still a lot of people who are new to this space and are gaining their confidence in terms of just the basics of mobile marketing and UA and what have you. I think the other thing that perhaps holds retargeting back may well be that people are focusing on the wrong KPIs. If your business is still focused on downloads and CPI, then you're going to be under much less pressure to actually drive incremental revenue through retargeting. You're going to be, focusing on just driving installs and maybe those first 3 to 7 days of engagement. Whereas if you're taking a more sophisticated view to this and really kind of trying to drive long-term value for your business, and if your business is giving you the guidance to do that, and setting you those right KPIs to go deep into the funnel, to focus on recurrent revenue, frequency of users, and retention, then you should hopefully be a lot more invested in making retargeting work.
Got it. I think we've got time for one more, which I will summarize. There's a few people asking, well, question around automation. What are your favorite automation tools? Why are companies still afraid of automation? Maybe that's from an agency thinking about their clients. And also, what's the big sort of challenge with automation?
Yeah. So favorite tools. I mean, I think for any marketer, the reality is that Facebook and Google are some of the biggest automation tools they now work with. So that's just a simple matter of fact, whether we like it or not. But of course, there are many, many other tools that help with automation. Obviously, our own tool provides a great baseline of data for you to make automation decisions on. You've got a lot of great campaign management tools out there as well now that are actually bringing together and aggregating a lot of the data, different data sources that you need in order to be able to scale your mobile marketing, and then enabling you to then automate campaigns based on that. So definitely be looking at the campaign management tools to do that as well, if that answers the question. And was there a final bit there about what scares you about automation, or what was the last bit, James?
What's the sort of challenge, or people also asking, are you developing any automation solutions at Appsflyer?
Yeah, so our tool has many features that rely on the data that is driven from the attribution data that we drive, those many billions and billions of data points. So we plug in and play really nicely with all of the different areas of the ecosystem, whether it's the customer data platforms, and really just underpin a lot of the different tools, whether it's your CRM system, your campaign management system, your the CDP, like I said, or your internal BI. All of our data sits underneath that and really feeds that, so that you can make the right decisions for your automation campaigns, or for any campaign you're running.
Got it. Okay. Well, I guess if people have more questions, they can potentially contact you directly. I guess that's David at Appsflyer, or they'll probably find
Llewellyn at Appsflyer. Very complicated surname. So just hit me on LinkedIn. Great. And I'm sure I'll be keen to speak to you.
I think we might be doing another workshop next week, hopefully with Appsflyer, with one of your colleagues. That's another opportunity. So
that's right.
I'd like to ask you to give David a big digital round of applause for coming on today and joining us. So that was really good. And so, really interesting topic. Whatever the going on outside, how you automate, that sort of trend's not really changing. and it's something to really sort of get stuck into, I guess, over the next year, and something, yeah, we can all sort of get our heads down with. Thanks everyone for showing up. We've got another panel starting shortly, this time looking at the post acquisition bit of the funnel. So we're talking app engagement. That should be really interesting. So we'll see you over there shortly, and thanks again.
Thanks very much, James. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.